And the news break coming in, a statement that's now been released by China on the bilateral exchange between India and China, which happened just yesterday. Now, the statement that's been released by China says that President Xi Jinping held talks with Prime Minister Modi on the sidelines of BRICS Summit. The two leaders had a candid and in-depth exchange of views on current India-China ties, and border standoff was also discussed between the two countries. So that's a detailed statement that's been issued by China on the bilateral talks that were held between Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. The two sides should bear in mind the overall interest of their bilateral relations and handle properly the border issue as well. Let's go across to Abhishek Kapoor joining us. Abhishek, good morning. Your understanding of the statement that's been released by China?
Well, so the Chinese have followed up on the Indian statement that was made by Foreign Secretary Vinay Kwatra yesterday in the briefing, Samiksha. But as they say, the proof of the pudding is in its eating. It is hoped that, like after an understanding that was reached between External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar and his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi on the sidelines of ASEAN Summit, the first disengagement had happened, for example, from the north and south bank of Pekong Su and the Finger areas. Similarly, if the Chinese president is saying something, it is that down the Central Military Commission, the message would go to the Chinese People's Liberation Army and right down to the Corps Commander and then downwards to the field commanders in Ladakh. And hopefully this would translate into a little more, appreciating position insofar as the Chinese are concerned. Because remember, it's they who came in. It's they who created obstacles to patrolling. It's they who led to the Galwan crisis. So obviously they have to pull back. Now, the formula that has been devised upon at multiple levels and through so many Corps Commander and External Affairs Ministry and Foreign Ministry level talks is essentially that you disengage and then you de-induct at a certain stage, you pull back. But that's something which has not happened. So
yes.
A preliminary disengagement has happened in the Finger areas and the north and south bank. The ticklish issue of Depsang and Demchok is something which has to be addressed. Now, the sticking point is the Chinese saying that buffer zones is the new reality, which obviously it cannot be. So if whatever has been agreed to between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, it travels down to the Corps Commander level, particularly on the Chinese side, it's something that would be looked at. Otherwise, of course, the stalemate would continue. What is important is, Samiksha, that an icebreaker has happened at the topmost level, one would say, because the last time the two leaders met was on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Bali last year, but that was not a meeting, just a courtesy hello, nothing beyond. And now it seems that going by the statements made by Indian side and the Chinese side, that the two leaders engaged a little in depth and discussed threadbare perhaps the issues, and that's why this longish statement coming in from the Chinese side, as also explained by Foreign Secretary Ms. Kwatra on our side. So I think this seems like a move forward, but as I said, the proof of the pudding is in its eating. Ultimately, it would depend on how the theater commanders on the ground or the Chinese side are responding to what Xi Jinping, who's not just the president of China, but also the president chairman of the Central Military Commission, which is the highest decision-making body insofar as China's military affairs go, and has decided. And also remember that this meeting has happened just ahead of Xi Jinping's participation in the G20 summit, which is September 9th and 10th in New Delhi, which means the two leaders have another opportunity to meet and do an appraisal. So if the Chinese side is really upfront about it, between now and then there's a fortnight and more, there should be some changes reflected on the ground, and then we could say that yes, whatever was agreed to or whatever dialogue happened between Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, it has had some impact on the ground, and things are moving in terms of disengagement. The hope, the only hope that comes out of this statement is that the Chinese are saying that we have to make sure that the border problem is actively managed, which means they are willing to really go down to the drawing board. It's difficult from wordings to really decipher the Chinese intent, but you have to read between the lines and you have to read the tea leaves and all. It's a complicated affair at the best of times. But then as I said, it is hope that given the fact that the two leaders at the topmost level have met. Hopefully, the theater commanders would listen into what their top commander is saying, which Xi Jinping happens to be as the chairman of the Central Military Commission. So going forward, as I see it, it is hoped that ahead of the G20 summit on September 9 and 10, between now and then, it's a fortnight and more, hopefully the message would percolate down and we will see some movement in the direction of disengagement and de-induction, which is the process which remains, particularly on the sticking points of Depsang and Demchok, which are essentially legacy issues going much before this government came to power in 2014.
All right, Abhishek, thank you for that deep insight into what it essentially means. Primarily, the question here boils down to whether that de-escalation is going to take place and if it is just an empty talk from China's side. So that's a detailed statement that's coming in from China after Prime Minister and Xi Jinping's meet on the sidelines of BRICS Summit. The statement by China that states that the two leaders had a candid and in-depth exchange of views on current India-China ties and other questions of shared interest. Not just this, the statement from China's side reads that President Xi Jinping stressed that improving China-India ties serves the common interests of two countries and people, and it is also conducive to peace, stability and development of the world and the region. The two sides should bear in mind the overall interest of their bilateral relations and handle properly the border issues so as to jointly safeguard peace and tranquility in the border region. So that's the statement that's coming in from China's side, just of course a day after India also issued a statement stating that border standoff was discussed in these talks between Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi. Also note that this, of course, comes just days ahead of the G20 summit in the national capital. On that note, listen in to this statement that's also coming from Vinay Kwatra, the Foreign Secretary on India-China talks that happened on the sidelines of BRICS Summit. All right, we'll just try to play out that bite, but important to note that a statement was issued from India's side as well by the Foreign Secretary Vinay Kwatra, who said that China's President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi did hold talks over the unresolved border issues along the LAC. The Prime Minister underlined the maintenance of peace and tranquility in the border areas. Listen in to that soundbite of the Foreign Secretary.